Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Brian and Jim here with Drink a Beer and Play a Game, and today we are going to be reviewing Twisted Metal 2 for the PlayStation 1.
Yes, this is a Patreon review request that comes in from our buddy NoGoodGoody. So thank you for the support, bud. This was a game that I was, as an N64 kid, I was so jealous of. My best friend had it on the PlayStation. I was like, it's a game I want. So when I got a PS2, this was the first game I actually bought, even before a PS2 game.
Jim, something feels wrong. We didn't get an absolutely terrible game this time.
I know.
Or did we?
Something's up there.
Or did we?
Find out.
Sounds terrible.
Originally released to the PlayStation in 1996, this was developed by Sony Interactive Studios America, along with Single Track, and published by Sony Computer Entertainment. This is the second game in the long-running series that's been kind of dead for a while now, but it expands on the first game, where that just took place in Los Angeles. This time, Calypso's holding a worldwide tournament, where everyone comes together, fights all over the world to try and win that prize of one wish of their dreams being granted.
Jim, don't forget about the TV show coming out.
Yeah, I hope it's good. Maybe that would be my wish in the tournament?
That would be pretty sweet.
Tooth.
Damn it! I'm supposed to say that stuff.
But yeah, this eventually got ported over to Windows and onto the PlayStation Network. So, let's get into it.
Alright, the graphics. Well, if you played Twisted Metal 1, you will notice right away there are a lot of improvements. But before I get there, I want to actually mention the difference in the characters. Because in Twisted Metal 1, they had the realistic photos and videos of the characters themselves, while this time it's actually like a 90s comic book style. It really comes down to preference. I will admit, I was a sucker for anything that used real people, so I was a little disappointed back in the day, but I will say, playing it today, it aged pretty damn well. When it comes to the vehicles and drivers themselves, there's a lot more detail put in here, and you have 12 drivers right off the jump, and you have 7 that return from the original game, and 5 new ones. Now, there are 3 unlocks, and one of them, and it is unfortunate, and we'll get to it, is Sweet Tooth. The other one is Minion, and then there's Dark Tooth, but you could only get him with Game Shark, and honestly, it used to cause the game to crash and bug out a whole lot, so it really wasn't worth it to go with him. But the really nice part is, as Jim mentioned, you're not just in LA this time. You have 8 different levels, and they take you all over the world. Some levels are much better than others. I'm looking at you, Holland. I hate you so much, because it's just basically a wide open field. Whereas areas like Paris and Hong Kong have a lot of hidden areas, so you get a lot more variety that's offered through the graphics, and they all look pretty good, and these levels can be pretty goddamn big. Plus, there's a lot more people to hit this time, so we always enjoy that. And the other nice part is, the damage is really shown on your vehicles, and especially if you're my favorite, Axel, you get to see his arms just being pulled apart and parts of his body being damaged as the car is. So I really appreciate the effort there. Yes, like any PS1 game, there's a ton of pop-in. There's a lot of jitteriness.
Right, don't forget the texture warping. So much texture warping. So much.
It doesn't matter, and if you're one of those CRT dorks, even on CRT, playing it today, it doesn't look great. It actually looks the best on a PSP. But that's all besides the point. The game still looks pretty decent, and it is above average. And of course, we have a lot of nostalgia for this game, so when it comes to scores, I gave it a 6, Jim gave it a 7. When it comes to beer, I'm going to give it 2 for needing to unlock 2 of the coolest characters in the whole game, and you can only do it with a cheat code.
All right, the sound. So I got to get this out of the way first, and this was a big complaint Brian had. The menu music. So you have this awesome intro music, and the music throughout the game itself is pretty good. I'll get to that in a second. But the quality on this menu music is so, muted. It's nothing but, reverb, and sounds like it was filled in, the middle of a warehouse underwater. It's so weird, but that gripe aside, the music in each level is really, really good. I actually included Los Angeles in one of my music list videos a while back. And a lot of the areas like Paris or some of the other areas will actually be kind of, stereotypical, I could even say, in its composition, but it's well done. Now, with all the mayhem going on for a lot of the time, you're not going to hear it once the action really kicks in. because these sound effects are loud, and they happen all the time. You'll constantly be hearing the sounds of missiles going off, special attacks from enemies, all that kind of good stuff. Now, a complaint we had, that while the compositions are good, they're kind of short. So for the levels that go on a little bit longer, you're just hearing this loop over and over and over again. And it gets a little old after a while. It's still enjoyable, but I don't know, maybe these could have been a little bit longer. But with all that being said, Brian gave it a 6 and I gave it a 7. And when it comes to beer, I'm just going to add 1 for that bizarre menu music.
All right, the control. Well, right off the bat, if you're playing on the original PlayStation, I'm sorry, any racing game does not feel that good because you're using the directional pad. But I will say it is still improved over Twisted Metal 1 because you don't have that awkward momentum when you go to turn. You just turn basically on a dime with this one. So that was a nice little improvement. But the control layout for me was still a little goofy, and yes, I am aware you can map the buttons however you want, but if you're just using the standard layout, then the D-pad moves you in all directions, including holding up to accelerate or down to go backwards. But if you're using the face buttons, square is accelerate, O is to brake, triangle is your boost, X held with square actually allows you to do a little tighter of a turn. The R1 and L1 buttons allow you to rotate between the different special weapons you have. R2 allows you to shoot your machine gun, and L2 allows you to shoot that specialty weapon. It seems pretty standard, and I will say, even though I don't love the layout, you get used to it fairly fast. But one of the unique things about this game, and something that drove me crazy, is as you progress through the game and it gets harder and harder, one of the things you really need to master are the advanced attacks. And they are, for the most part, a simple input of directional pads, such as, getting your freeze or your jumps or your rear attacks. They're only 3-button combos, but doing this while you're moving was annoying enough, and we felt a lot of the times they didn't really register. Plus, the game manual doesn't even tell you how to get the shield, which is really annoying because it's another thing you're gonna need to know. Putting all that together, it's still just a mess of buttons, and there is no true mastering the control because you're really just holding down fire and shooting your specials and spamming the hell out of it. With the issues of the registering the inputs and the initial layout, we couldn't give it perfect scores, so we both gave it 6s. It was fine, you can deal with it, but it could have been made a little bit easier. So when it comes to beers, I'm going to give it 3 beers for the number of inputs for those special attacks.
Alright, the gameplay. Well, if you've played any Twisted Metal game, you kinda know what to expect from this. A whole bunch of cars get dropped in an area, and you have to kill each other. If you're playing, basically, you have to be the last one surviving. So, how do you do this? Like Brian said, you have all your special weapons, you have your special attacks. You can pick from all these different cars, and each have different stats, and they do all feel different. And some of these cars are easier to master than others. Some of them are even not that practical to use, but they're so satisfying, like learning how to do Mr. Slam's friggin' grab and slam. It just looks cool every time. One big thing that they improved on is just like the interactivity with the levels. Because in almost all of the levels, there's stuff to blow up, there's stuff in the background to do, and it's cool. Where like in Paris, you can blow up the Eiffel Tower. In Holland, you can blow up the windmills. In New York, you can shoot at the Statue of Liberty and show her in a bikini. Los Angeles, you can blow up the Hollywood sign. All kinds of stuff like that, which is so cool. One thing that I didn't realize going back to it is how hard this freaking game is. Like, I played the hell out of it as a kid, but going back, I was like, holy crap, how did I ever beat this? So they give you 3 lives, and that's it. Now, there is a password system for every level, and it's a unique password for every car for every level. So it's not like you can just dump in a random password with whatever character you use, and you have to, back in the day, have a big-ass piece of loose leaf with all these codes on there. So one big problem, and it kind of carries over from the first one for the difficulty, is the fact that, for the most part, you're always being ganged up on, whether it's single player or multiplayer. And especially in single player, like, you'll see enemies fighting against each other in the background, but their health barely goes down. Like, you basically have to do all the work against everyone. So you're basically just constantly running and gunning and just trying to go and pick up some health, come back, do some more damage, all that kind of stuff. In some levels, it's definitely easier than others, too, because some levels you can find a quarter and hide in, or you can dodge behind a wall, or you just have goddamn nightmares like Holland, where that's the hardest level in the game, because there is no hiding anywhere. You're just running for dear life and trying to kill everything as quick as you can. So, That's just pure madness. But yeah, every level has little secrets, little personality to it, which I love. And the core gameplay is still fun. And there's multiplayer. So you can play with a buddy, or you can do a co-op tournament. So you can play against each other or a co-op tournament, which is, that's fun. I wish it was ever brought to an era where you could play it multiplayer. Maybe you can online, I'm not exactly sure. I never did it through there, so I couldn't tell you. But it's a game that definitely shows its age. It's a little sloppy to control. I mean, with modern systems, you can use the DualShock support, but it wasn't made for it, so you don't have that smooth kind of control with it. It's a product of its time, but it is still fun. So Brian gave it a 6, and I gave it a 7. And when it comes to beer, I'm going to add 2 beers. 1 happy beer for all the interactivity that they put into it, and 1 sad beer for just how friggin' hard it is.
The originality is one of the areas where Jim and I disagree the most. For me, I felt like it took everything from 1, added maybe a few more features and a few things, but nothing I hadn't seen in plenty of other games. And at its core, I mean, that's kind of all we really wanted out of these Twisted Metal games. Newer cars, new ways to kill each other, but it's nothing that really reinvents the wheel. Jim, he was looking at the game from a different perspective, saying, hey, you went to different levels now, you also have the special inputs, so that was unique system to the actual game. And I can applaud that. For me, like I said, it just didn't feel as unique as it should have been. So when it comes to scores, I gave it a 2. Jim gave it a 4. When it comes to beer, you know what? I'm just going to give 1 beer because I don't expect a game series like this to really be that impressive in terms of how much new it offers.
Replayability. Usually I can keep this short. So you can play through the game with every character to get their unique endings, which is always fun. And you can play it multiplayer. So besides that, without codes, there's nothing really to unlock. So it kind of limits you there. It's just really as much fun as you get out of it. So we both gave it 6s. And when it comes to beer, I'll just give it 1 beer for... I do love those endings. They're just so damn goofy and fun.
So overall, I gotta be honest, this was a game I looked back on and thought, I'm gonna re-love it as much as I did as a kid.
Yeah.
Didn't age well, as Jim pointed out. The difficulty, some of the limitations of the system, you can't overlook completely. But I will say, it is still a ton of fun if you get a buddy who could appreciate as much as we do. So you can find some fun there. Has plenty of flaws, but if you're like us and you grew up in the 90s, that soundtrack is going to pull you right back, and there is something satisfying about just shooting the shit out of each other.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the game is just fun. So, and then once you get used to the control again and the gameplay, you can have fun out of it, but like we've said a bunch of times this video, it has shown its age, but it's one of those games that I can never bash. I've just had too many good memories with it, so... It is what it is, but I do have to give a big shout out once again to good old NoGoodGoody. Thank you for the support. Thank you for letting us relive our childhoods again.
Thank you for giving us a good game.
Yeah, finally. Jesus.
When it comes to scores, I gave it a 6, Jim gave it a 7, and we combined them all together. It comes out to a 6.2. That's probably as fair, if not overly fair, you're going to see from a modern reviewer, because you're either going to have the people who are way too nostalgic for it, or the people who it's their first time playing it and they're like, why would anyone like this? Because like most PS1 games.
Still feels harsh. Still feels harsh.
Still feels harsh, but it's fair. So with that, we want to say thank you everyone for watching, and cheers.
Cheers, guys.
When it comes to beer pairing, I'm going to go with the Founders Brewing Company's Devil Dancer. This is a triple IPA coming in at 12%. It has a ton of flavor, but yes, it is very boozy. And for some reason, I feel like if you're going to dance with the devil and go with Calypso's tournament, you got to do it right. So grab a couple of these beers, sit back, and shoot at your buddies. But remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly.